Welcome back. Been waiting to say that for a little while. How is everybody doing? 2022 started, a little bit of Rona, just a little bit. So luckily it doesn't affect your eyes. You can still watch Formula One. So part 2 of this review, I'm eventually going to get this done. It's taken a little while, but there's a lot of races and a lot of qualifying sessions. And what I didn't realise was when you watch it all back, how much you actually need to watch. You can't just jump on and watch the highlights and try and get the gist. Even though obviously when I did all the race reviews, did all the prep for that, and got acres and acres of paper. But watching it back, I'm trying to, like I said at the beginning, I'm trying to see, like, preempt stuff that's going to happen in the future, or listen to what the stuff that Brundle and Crofty say, you know, get the general vibe and see where the big momentum changes happened. So having watched a lot of these races now, it's interesting when you go back, you really see some important bits and you think, okay, that's going to become very important later on, especially about car development. I'm noticing the car development and the engine allocation. So obviously you realise, okay, he takes an engine there, 5-place penalty there, or you're preempting one that they might take at the end, and that's kind of where I'm at now in terms of my watching back. It's fascinating to watch back. It really is. Obviously, you watch it at the time on the Sunday, you're just watching to see who wins. Then you re-watch it on the Monday or the Tuesday for the video. You get an idea of what happened, you speak about it, you get a better idea, and then you forget about it. And then you go back again a couple months later and you realise, wow, that was actually a crazy race. And a lot of my perspectives have changed, especially the wheel-to-wheel combat. They've changed slightly. You know, a lot of it where I thought it was a bit over the line or maybe wasn't too bothered, some of them have changed, but I will go into that. And obviously there's 5 parts to this. This is part number 2. And this is where, in terms of, if you pick up from my last video, just a minute, the first video I did, where it was very much Hamilton dominating. Red Bull had the better car, but I think, like I said, I don't think that Red Bull believed that they had the best package, and they were like trying to lead from the front like they do later on in the season. I think Mercedes was still kind of like, nah, that's our ball. And Red Bull kind of like, yeah, we have the fastest car, but we're not really too sure. That kind of played out in the first 4 races. Hamilton won 3 out of 4. You forget he won 3 out of the first 4 races. And the race he didn't win, he was on pole in Imola in the wet, and it decided to rain in between qualifying and the race. Otherwise, he probably would have gone off and won all 4. So a lot happened. But look, let's get into it. Review part number 2, Monaco. Now this race was as bad as I remember. I'll be honest. Again, on all of this, I don't need to preface this every single time I say something good or bad about either one of them. But just take this. No matter what happens, I'll judge every race as it happens, no matter who won the race. I'll try and judge the race based on atmosphere and how good the actual racing was, how much of a spectacle it was, the gaps between all the people. Regardless, this race was terrible. I think everyone, including Martin Brundle, said one of the most lackluster races I've ever seen. And that's a fact. So this one was interesting because at the beginning you had Bottas, Verstappen, Perez and Sainz all going for pole. Now it did look like, you know, the Ferraris and Hamilton was way out of it. So you had the Ferraris, Verstappen and Bottas were all close. Hamilton was like P7 all through Q1 and Q2. Not really challenging at all. Mercedes led both championships coming in, and Red Bull were under a little bit of pressure. So that was definitely the narrative going in. It was kind of, even though Monaco was obviously a Red Bull track, but it was definitely seen as Red Bull were under pressure. Mercedes were in the ascendancy. They needed to have a good result here. Hamilton kind of gave us a snapshot to how bad it was actually going to be by not even getting top 5 in Q1 and Q2. Leclerc goes off and does a great first lap. Verstappen made a mistake on his second run, so did Hamilton. And then obviously Leclerc puts it in the wall, which is savage because at the time people were thinking it was going to be it did on purpose. I mean, looking at the damage he did and obviously the risk damaging the gearbox, which he ended up doing, that was a ridiculous thing. A ridiculous thing to kind of insinuate at the time. There's a lot of people kind of like, I'm not too sure if he meant it. He absolutely didn't. And unfortunately, that meant he missed out on the race, on the drive to the installation lap. His car didn't make it through that. Verstappen still started second on the grid, but on pole position, if that makes sense. So, as soon as he blocked off Bottas off the line, it was just off to the races from there. Bottas's pit stop He got his wheel machine done, so he couldn't actually take the wheel off. So he was out of the race. That was an easy P2 for him, thrown away. Hamilton's strategy, that was one of the first times Mercedes really got the strategy very wrong. So Hamilton ended up losing all sorts of positions. Came 7th in the end, pitted at the end for a fastest lap. But yeah, Monaco overall, first time Max had led the World Championship in any World Championship, any single seater. So that was a huge momentum swing given that Mercedes and Hamilton led going in, and they flipped it. All of a sudden both championships are now being led by Red Bull. So this was a huge momentum switch. Perez had a good race then. Obviously Hamilton came almost nowhere. Bottas didn't even finish. So momentum wise, it was huge. Like this was what changed. The championship changed here. So there's a few of them I'm going to mention, and normally at the start of each of my reviews is going to be the start of a big momentum change. And having dominated the first couple of races, this was now Max Verstappen, Red Bull in the ascendancy for this next couple of sections. Now, the next race in Baku was, I mean, it's an incredible race looking back. I mean, I knew it was obviously, at the time it was incredible, but it was threatening to go one way, then flips the other way completely. So obviously red flag City in qualifying. Everyone's hitting in the wall at the same corner. I think it's turn 15. I think 3 different people put it in the wall there, causing red flags. Now, well, interestingly, Hamilton actually gave, I don't know if it was on purpose or not, Hamilton gave Leclerc a tow down the huge kilometre-long back straight, or home straight. So the first runs, once again, second week running, Leclerc puts it on pole in run 1. Now run 2 comes along, and guess what happens? Red flag. So given that everyone was jockeying for position at the time, it was kind of like, okay, cool, everyone freeze where you are. Leclerc gets another pole position, Hamilton second, Verstappen in third. Perez screwed up. Perez wasn't, I mean, screwed up is probably harsh. He didn't get the right toe, actually. Norris got a penalty, and Bottas, again, like I noticed, you'll see a lot of this is going to happen with Bottas early on, and then Perez a bit later on. They're just like, sometimes they're just really nowhere near. On a track where you should be up the top, you know, outside of Monaco, it's hard to get a lap together if you're out of position. Yeah. But Bottas really screwed this one up in P10. He was absolutely nowhere. So this was looking like an interesting race just because obviously Leclerc wasn't the fastest car. He managed to get to put it on pole, but he obviously wasn't going to be the fastest car. Then off the race goes. Hamilton, well, he only spends two laps in front. Hamilton and Verstappen both go past Leclerc quite easily. And they kind of control the pace for a little while, Hamilton and Verstappen. So up until the pit stops, it was looking like, okay, cool, let's see how far they can go on their tyres, and let's see if Hamilton can stay in front of the pit stops. Hamilton gets a slow pit stop. Perez and Verstappen both jump him. And then that's kind of how the race settled in. It kind of settled into a nice little rhythm from there. They're just kind of cruising along in that top 3. Hamilton can't get close. It's a very, very tough middle sector to follow. And then obviously the long straight. This is back before Mercedes had a particularly good engine. Even though they did take their second new one at this race. So it should have had that boost that everyone talks about towards the end. So that's one thing to note. Mercedes took a new engine here, and it wasn't particularly fast. Like, they weren't exactly flying down the straights. And obviously this was the last race where the bendy wing controversy was going on. If you remember, Red Bull had a wing that kind of like collapsed a bit, kind of like what they were complaining about Mercedes having at the end. And then the FIA introduced a test after this race. So this was the last race everyone was allowed to run what they wanted. And it showed. So Mercedes weren't able to get anywhere near. Funnily enough, it was all going very swimmingly for Max Verstappen at that point. Lance Stroll's tyre blows up on lap 31. And everyone's thinking, that was a bit random. I'm assuming that's probably debris. Everyone needs to keep an eye out. 15, 16 laps later, Verstappen from miles out, well, not miles out in front, 5-6 seconds I think it was, his tyre blows up. Same left rear, smashes into the wall. Red flag comes out. Now we're looking at Perez, Hamilton, 1-2 from a standing start. They managed to get it all cleared up, and this was the first. Actually, tell you what, we'll pause here. This was the first time the FIA or the stewards, Marco Masi, made a decision, certainly in relation to red flags and safety cars, for the benefit of races. This is a preface to what happens later on, certainly in Abu Dhabi. They decided, right, we need to get a couple laps in at the end. We'll red flag the sessions, clear all the debris, red flag it, everyone can start on the grid and we'll get 2 good laps of racing. Now, quite interesting, obviously depending on what happens later on, but in terms of this particular race, Hamilton's brakes were noticeably smoking off on the grid, and it looks like he's got an easy fly down into turn 1, get in front, and then just cruise through the last 2 laps. Didn't turn out that way. Hamilton forgets to turn out his brake magic, which basically takes the brake bias to the back of the car, so he's got no brakes, flies off down into the escape road. Perez goes off for an easy win. Vettel follows him home. Gasly ends up coming 3rd. Bottas wasn't even in the top 10 again. And then obviously given Perez his first win. So this was, momentum-wise, we came out of, again, part 1 of this review. Part 2, you've had Monaco and Baku. Hamilton's got a 7th and a 14th. Verstappen DNFing in this particular race was interesting because, I mean, he would have won 6 or 7 races in a row if this one wasn't involved. So in terms of momentum, it was a huge. It brought everyone back. I think it brought everyone back to sort of like, even-ish playing field without Hamilton, without Verstappen and Red Bull running away with it. So this one was fascinating because it could have got really, really, really out of hand for the championship. The championship could have been absolutely done, dusted, and finished without this particular race. But it was kind of their own fault because Red Bull were running lower tyre pressure. I think a lot of the teams were, including Aston Martin. I think generally teams were running low, or they're running a tyre configuration or a setup that allowed their tyre pressures to drop below the allowed levels, which means obviously you're going to open yourself up for tyre blow-ups, which is what the Pirelli, the tyre manufacturer, team boss, or the boss of Pirelli, came out and said. He said, listen, the guys are basically cheating with their tyres. That's why they've blown up. So kind of their own fault, but also a tyre blow-up when you're winning the race comfortably was one thing. But then Hamilton forgetting to turn literally a button on the back of his steering. You see like a little button on the back of his steering wheels. You tap that, and that's what the brake magic is. He literally, on the start, when he got pushed over to the side by Perez, flicked the brake magic, and then no brakes off down the escape road. So it was kind of even, because obviously Verstappen crashed out for no fault of his own. Hamilton just forgot to turn a button off and threw away 25 points. So it's all very even, I think, at this point. Bottas was again, it was one of those anonymous races for Bottas. Qualified P10, just didn't make any inroads through the field at all, which I think can't have helped his case for that second seat that he's ended up losing to Russell. I think this is one of those races like you would have wanted him to really kick on from there, but that was that. So race 3 in this little review section was France, and then we went to a triple header. So triple header being 3 races in 3 weeks, not a lot of time to make any development changes in between those, so your performance is kind of locked in at the beginning of this. You can make some changes, obviously they will end up 2 different tracks, but if you've got the best car going in here, if you've managed to make a big upgrade, it's going to really help you. In this particular one, this is when they obviously changed the flexi wing and the tyre pressure rules after. Red Bull took a new engine with Verstappen, so that was key for this particular race. Obviously, there's a lot of long straights in France, and obviously, like I said, you could lock it in for the 2 races in Austria. So previously, Mercedes stronghold, they've won both the races there. I think Hamilton won, he led almost all the laps there in the last 2 years. So it's looking like if Red Bull could beat Mercedes there, it was going to be a long season for them. So Red Bull were obviously superior early doors in qualifying. Verstappen put it on pole. Hamilton and Bottas behind them. Perez was a little bit far off, given that the Red Bull was so dominant. And then race comes. Verstappen makes a rare mistake, turn 1. He flies off the track. Hamilton's in control. Strange undercut after the first pits. I mean, Lewis was in front fairly, not comfortably, a couple seconds in front. And then somehow he gets undercut from about 3 seconds back, which I don't think anyone realised. Then that moves into a new kind of phase of the race where Max, Hamilton and Bottas were well clear of the field. And then I think it starts to look like Red Bull are going to try and pull a Bahrain Part 2 or a Barcelona Part 2 and chase down Mercedes on fresher tyres, which they did end up doing. Now the gap was 18 seconds with 9 laps to go. And you're thinking, okay, Verstappen has to pass both Hamilton and Bottas to win this race. He passes Bottas quite easily. Bottas is fuming. This is the race Bottas was fuming with his team, where I think they kind of left him out to dry to protect Hamilton a little. I mean, more than a little bit. I think that's literally what they did. They should have put him on a 2-stop. He got done by Perez at the end as well for a podium. So Verstappen ended up going past both of them quite easily and winning the race. Towards the end of the race, it was looking good. I mean, Hamilton is very good at that, putting in a couple of good laps when he's being chased down, and then kind of extended the gap a little bit. It turned out there's just too many laps for Hamilton to do that. Hamilton ends up getting down on the second last lap. Brilliant lap from Verstappen, brilliant chase down from Verstappen. So at this point, having been chased down from the lead, and Mercedes once again, like with Baku, kind of been a bit tentative on strategy, and you're going to see that obviously throughout the whole season. Mercedes, I don't know what it is about Mercedes. They always want to do the safe thing. They never really roll the dice dramatically. Certainly not with Hamilton anyway. It's never too out of control. It's always kind of very measured and very sort of, yeah, well, look at the data. The lap says this. Whereas Red Bull tend to be a lot better with rolling the dice. Obviously, Mercedes have had plenty of brilliant strategy calls at Hungary and Spain, to name a few. But it seems this particular season they were still kind of just trying to play it safe and hoping that the impossible wasn't possible. But obviously with Verstappen, it often is, because he's the driver you want in these kind of situations to pull off magical comebacks or magical chase downs. So this was a very, very good race. This is up there. I'm going to do like a top 10, top 5 race of the season. This was a very, very good race because Max, Lewis and Bottas were gone clear. It wasn't just Max and Lewis. It was 3 of them that all gone clear. And in a bit of strategy games involved, Verstappen pits, chases Hamilton down, has to overtake both of them on track. And it's a really nice track. I like the look of the track at Paul Ricard. So that's a super fun race. Verstappen got the fastest lap that particular race. Jump forward to a double header in Austria. I mean, my favourite track on the Formula 1 game anyway. Not the best track for racing on though, because there's literally, depending on what kind of car you've got, 2 overtaking spots, and they're both after DRS. If you can kind of hold off there, there's that last section is as good as it is to look and as good as it's to drive. You just can't follow through there. So Bottas spinning in the pit lane in practice was the start of Mercedes' problems there. He ends up getting a 3-place grid drop, which was fair. Verstappen was comfortable through both of these races, but certainly in this first one, the Styrian Grand Prix they called this one. Verstappen was comfy, and then obviously in the race, Hamilton and Verstappen were well clear, 15 seconds ahead. Hamilton had to pit last minute for a fastest lap. Extremely straightforward win. The only notes I've got on this race, very pedestrian, extremely straightforward win. Perez had a bit of a chase down on Bottas because he had a slow stop. Verstappen at the end of the race slowed down on the pits on the finish line and did a burnout, which is a cool. I mean, I think it's cool. It's cool, but it's dangerous as hell. Like, you can't slow down on the racetrack like that. But he didn't get a penalty for that, luckily. But I thought that was quite funny when he slowed down right in front of his team, did a little burnout. I thought that was quite cool. But yeah, it's obviously bad. Can't do that going forward. But it was still cool nonetheless. Yeah, Hamilton grabbed that little faster lap at the end. I've been monitoring, and I'm going to tell you the results of my pit wall kind of bugbear. I've got a few bugbears I'm going to get into in these reviews, but I've made a note of who's on the pit wall each of these weeks, and my research has yielded that yes, Horner is on there a lot more than everyone else. It's a lot more balanced than I thought it was. I didn't realise it was quite as, they do go through almost everyone. The only people I haven't heard so far, and I'm almost near the end of the season, obviously Mercedes, I don't think they've never sent anyone to the pit wall in terms of reporting back to the actual Sky TV. And I haven't heard Franz Tost from Toro Rosso, AlphaTauri, and Freddie Vasseur sometimes has been on from Alfa Romeo, but only those 3 teams haven't been on by the end of the season. But Horner is on a lot. So that wasn't just, I wasn't just thinking in my head, why is Horner on every week? He was on a lot of the season, but I'll report back later on in the season when I have the full results of that. Now, the final race in this particular part of the review, which is basically just the Max dominance era, another race where Max just absolutely smashed it on pole until Lando Norris showed up. It was cruise control throughout the whole thing. Hamilton was P4 in this qualifying. Bottas was P5. Verstappen was absolutely dominant. This is the first race where the big crowds came out, and obviously anywhere in Europe, it's going to be you're going to get big orange flares everywhere. This is huge home sport for Max Verstappen in Austria. Obviously, it's the Red Bull home track, but huge orange army. Norris almost took pole by 5/100th of a second. I think he made a mistake. I think it showed the mini sector on the sky pad on the actual race. He literally, I think he's at the last corner, little bit wider, and that's how Verstappen managed to get a pole. But Norris could have taken pole off him. Perez managed to beat Hamilton as well. The race shows up, and it was like, see you later again. Once again, Verstappen just absolutely clear of the field. The interesting part of this particular race were the penalties. Now, there's a big kind of talking point after the race about the FIA or the stewards getting too involved, and I think this might have influenced their decision making throughout the rest of the season, because this particular race was a lot of incidents, but they gave out a lot of penalties. But as you're going to see in a minute, they did get them right, but they just didn't apply this logic throughout the rest of the season. I think that's but people complained after this, so it's kind of 6-1. So forget about Verstappen. Norris kind of took Perez out. I mean, Perez was trying to go around the outside of this turn where, if you remember, Albon trying to go around the outside of Hamilton. If you try and go around the outside of a corner that's going, or whichever way, if you go around the outside, you're going to be in trouble. And this applies to absolutely everybody, no matter where you are. If you're on the outside, you're going to be in trouble. Now, the guy on the inside obviously has to leave you room to get back on the track, especially if he's got the whole, because obviously on the inside you've got the whole of the corner to take. Especially if the guy isn't right up alongside you. Now, Norris kind of left Perez. He kind of walked to the edge of the track, and then there was a time when he could have carried on. He left him out. Perez ended up going off on the gravel and losing a lot of positions. Now, as we know, the consequence of a action that may or may not deserve a penalty doesn't have any bearing into the actual penalty. I don't think that's true. I think they literally look at it, as you've seen with Silverstone. They don't look at a situation and go, okay, he's done that, therefore it's a penalty. They kind of look at, right, is he at the back of the grid? Is he out of the race? I think they do take that into consideration, even though they shouldn't. Norris got a 5-second penalty for this one, for leaving no space. Later on, the clerk is obviously getting a bit irate behind Perez. He ends up getting pushed out the same exact position, but this is way more ambitious. This is an ambitious one. I don't think he should have. He tried the overtake, got really left out there by Perez. Perez gets the penalty for that, another 5-second penalty. Couple laps later, Perez runs a clerk out wide at turn 6, which isn't the same corner now. Now, this is a corner he really should have. This is the only one out of 3 that was definitely a penalty, like for sure, because it's a turn you shouldn't be overtaking anyway. But if you are, you need to give the guy some space. Perez left him out. He went off into the gravel again. So he had 2 5-second penalties. So he was quite lucky there. But apart from that, Verstappen, like I said, he led both races in Austria from start to finish. Just was under no pressure at any point in either race. That goes to show how good the car was and how bad Mercedes were. And the gaps, I think you'll notice, I've kind of put up some gaps every now and again throughout these reviews. These, like, certainly Verstappen, but often Verstappen and Hamilton, they're so far in front and the pace difference. I don't think people really realise. They talk about how good the battle is. I don't think people actually realise how much faster the Red Bull and the Mercedes are than everyone else. Like, these guys, every single race, 30 seconds to 40 seconds clear. Earlier in the first 10, 15 laps, they're often 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds clear. And it's like a different category of Formula One completely. So hopefully that does change, because a lot of these teams, Ferrari, they need a lot to go their way. They need a specific kind of track and a lot to go their way to win a race. But most races, this race, there's just, even if they started 10th, there's no way Verstappen and Red Bull could not win the race, because they're just so much faster lap on lap. They're a second or 2 seconds faster every single lap. which is fascinating to me. But either way, Verstappen left Austria 32-point lead, and Red Bull led by 44. Now, at this point, I remember thinking when I was watching it live at the time, the championship was basically over at this point, because 32-point lead, you'd have to lose. Yeah, first you need DNFs, you need significant damage, and you just get significantly beaten from here on out. And given the pace advantage of Red Bull, you talk about DNFs, you need at least 1 or 2 DNFs from here. And obviously, we know what does end up happening. So that was my second part of the review. This is the Max dominance era. So this is the only part. This is the only part of my 5 reviews that I'm going to do, where it was went all Max's way. I mean, this was almost a clean sweep. Well, it was Red Bull clean sweep. Max won 4 out of the 5 races. Perez won the other one. And then pole position. Max got all of it. Well, Max ended up being on pole position 4 times because Leclerc couldn't start the 5th one. So absolute dominance, like just one-way traffic. The first one was kind of like a bit here and there, but Hamilton managed to win 3 races. This one was like one-way traffic, huge gap, and nothing could go wrong, or could it? Next race is Great Britain, and we all know what happened there. So I will reevaluate and come back to you with part 3.